So yes, I'm going to be talking about presenting and interpreting natural history specimens with empathy. Originally, I wrote this for K through 12 educators, but if you work in a natural history or zoo environment and you write curriculum or are interested in using empathy or other social emotional learning skills in your curriculum to interpret your collections, this might also be of benefit for you. So just really quick, I'm the evaluator and empathy program coordinator at the Zoological Society of Milwaukee. I was a K-12 educator for 11 years. I've had experience working in natural history museums as an outreach specialist for K through 12 schools, and just in general, a nerd about town for specimens. So we at our zoo wanted to ask why we wanted to try and integrate empathy and social emotional learning skills into our programming, both on-site and off-site. And we noticed that a lot of schools were already integrating social emotional learning skills into their curriculum. And so empathy and teaching children empathy for both wildlife and natural history specimens was a way to integrate that into their curriculum without kind of shoehorning it in. It would just be a natural part of that curriculum. Science has shown that empathy for humans and empathy for animals uses the same part of your brain. So we were hoping by extension that would also go to parts of animals or taxidermy. And that's something that we are interested in doing some further research on. And then youth are more likely to take part in conservation action as adults if they have mentors in their lives that are enthusiastic and engaged in nature and natural history. So if they, don't have parents that are super into nature or museums, but they have a teacher who's super enthusiastic, or they meet someone at a zoo or an aquarium or a museum that, really sparks that curiosity for them, they are much more likely to grow up to want to protect those things, both in the natural range or as specimens, like that beautiful passenger pigeon that Amanda was talking about, even though for that particular specimen, there's not much to protect except for the specimen itself. So I think almost everyone here probably has a working definition of empathy, but for our purposes, for our grant funding, we define empathy as a stimulated emotional state that relies on the ability to perceive, understand, and care for or about the experiences and perspectives of another person or animal, and in this instance, we would say object as well. The three types of empathy that we are looking for are cognitive, which is I understand the emotional response, or I understand what the emotional response of that object or animal or person would be. Affective is I feel the same thing that they are feeling. And motivational is I know those two things, and now I want to take caring action on behalf of that species, or I want to handle this object delicately because I know its significance and its importance. So the empathy bridge is a tool that we use with our public to talk about the different steps that you take to get to that empowering caring action. So step one is assuring animal or collection welfare. So in our case, knowing that the animals, how they are being taken care of is our first step. For natural history collections and natural history museums, people knowing that those items are important and how they are taken care of, and even knowing like the security protocol is in place is enough to assure that these collections are important and that they are cared for. Step two is introducing the collection or introducing the animal if it's a live collection, member of a live collection. So introducing them by name, if you use gender for your animals, like we suggest doing that. If you have a class pet, if you're a K through 12 educator, having a name and a gender for the animal is also good. Talking about personalities or characteristics of that animal. So if you're looking at a taxidermied jaguar, talking about the behaviors of that animal would be one of those things. So even if you can't observe natural behaviors, you can talk about those behaviors that would be exhibited if the animal were alive. Step three is informing the audience. So this is kind of clearing away the cobwebs of misconceptions. So if you were looking at a diorama and there's an octopus in it, and someone is saying, well, why wouldn't there be two? It looks lonely. And then talking about how octopi are solitary animals, and that would not be like an accurate representation of that animal in its natural environment. You're informing the audience, but you're also kind of clearing away those cobwebs of misconception. Step 4 is inviting perspective taking. And this is where, as educators, we have like a real role that we can play. And especially if you are like a docent or a volunteer or an educator within a museum, a zoo, or an aquarium, inviting perspective taking allows kids and even adults to put themselves into the position of those animals or someone that is in that time period. So like we were talking about the rainforest. Like if you have an exhibit where you're walking through and it's very like interactive and you're kind of steeped in that, where you feel like you kind of become part of that exhibit, that's inviting perspective taking. If you are having your kids do field journals where they are going out and doing like data collection of their own, they're doing water testing, they are inviting that perspective of being a scientist. And then the last step is empowering caring action. So you would hope that steps 1 through 4 have kind of built that emotional and cognitive connection to the material. So then you kind of hit them with the, well, did you know that like, you know, this species of bee is actually endangered in Wisconsin? Now that we've learned all about its life cycle and like how, you know, how valuable they are to us. And now you've had the perspective of working like this bee because we all work together on this project. Did you know that they are endangered? And here are the things that we can do to make that better for us here. So hopefully you go through steps 1 through 4 and it leads to this final step, which is a caring action on behalf of the animal or the collection or the natural world itself. So I have some connections here. This is by no means like comprehensive. They're just some examples. So I have grades 3 through 5, middle school and high school. I just pulled 3 random standards, and then I showed just which steps of the empathy bridge would inform those standards. Some quick actions. So if you don't have, you know, if you're writing curriculum and you want to just include some quick actions for empathy use, but you cannot write a whole new curriculum that is all about empathy. So some quick things that you can do, I've broken them down by the different steps of the empathy bridge. I'm not going to go over all of these right now, but this PowerPoint, I will put it up onto cubes. I just need to review how to do that. And all the materials that I'm going to reference will also be there as well. So you could print out the evaluation materials as well, if you would like. So one of the ones that I will focus on is the Umwelt. So if you are, you know, at a natural history museum, an aquarium, a zoo, and you want to do that perspective taking or assuring animal welfare, the Umwelt is a really great way for those who might not know. It is just trying to experience something from that perspective of that animal and seeing things through their eyes, literally, and using all 5 senses to experience what that animal would experience. And we've had great success with that in our classrooms, as well as our offsite programs, with using tools to get kids to, you know, feel things or see things through the eyes of the animals, and using those natural history specimens to get them to see what it would be like to have like only like the teeth of an obligate carnivore, for example. So I won't go through all of these, but if anyone has questions about them, I'm happy to answer them. Okay. So something I would be asked a lot, we presented this at the Wisconsin Science Teachers Conference as well. And someone asked me, well, I don't have a lot of natural history specimens lying around in my classroom. Where can I get them? So I just have a few quick suggestions. Natural history museum programs or docent interpretations are really good if you're able to go on a field trip. Usually they have like stop spot carts. We have some at the zoo as well that have like furs and pelts and things that kids can feel and touch. But natural history museums are also really good for having those carts. Local conservation organizations are also really good to reach out to, like like an Audubon Society, or like a place that does conserve. We have a couple here in Wisconsin, but if you know of any in your local neck of the woods, you might be able to borrow things from them. The picture that I have on the far right here is from our the National Crane Foundation or the International Crane Foundation, they actually have a trunk that educators can rent out, and you can see all the things inside. There are some like little specimen things. You can see like the leg of a crane. There's a skull. You can see how the birds are banded, and also you can see about their diet, their range. So the whole thing is meant to be like an educational supplement to your materials. Reaching out to local universities and community colleges or other educational institutions. I have talked to people at UW-Milwaukee about occasionally borrowing things from their collection to run a program. And we are also happy to share our resources with them, especially if you can have like a collaborative relationship is really good. Local taxidermists and other naturalists might be willing to lend you specimens to use temporarily. And then if you go through a specimen company, you can get either real or clone models. This is one that we have in our collections up at the very top. It's like an ascarid, so like a parasitic worm that's preserved in fluid. And then down here at the very bottom is an elephant tooth that is a clone, but looks pretty good. And those do run you, I don't know, a couple $100. So if you have something that you teach every single year, it might be worth investing in one of your own. Evaluation. So how do you measure this? How do you see if it's actually working in your classroom? You can evaluate with the next gen science standards and state standards. So if kids are keeping field journals, you can use NGSS, or you can use ELA standards and do a cross curriculum evaluation of what you are doing. One of the tools that I use most often is called the MECAP, and this is right here on the right hand side. It's a code sheet. So anytime you see an empathetic reaction or a conservation leaning action, you can make a check, and then you just take notes on the side and code them, and then you can see how well the kids are demonstrating empathy or social emotional learning at that particular time. I made a special one for biofacts, so for non-living entities, that includes things like, did you kill this animal? Like caring about like how the animal came to be a part of the collection, which is something I got asked when I was a docent at the public museum, and also when I was an employee there. People are very curious how collections are obtained. And now that I work and manage the biofact collection for a zoo, I'm getting asked those same questions. So so this particular one is modified for that kind of caring response to measure that as well. The other thing is, if you just want a really quick before and after response, the far left here shows these emotion wheels that we use for kiddos. The very simple one on the very left is for second grade. The middle one is third grade. And then the third one is fourth grade, because this is our Animal Ambassador program runs these 3 grades back to back to back. So we're with those kids for 3 years. And as they move through the program, they're asked to reach a level of complexity with their emotional responses. So you basically ask a student before you present an artifact or an animal or a piece of taxidermy, how they feel beforehand, and you ask them to circle the emotions. And if they are able to write, you ask them to write why they feel that way. And then you introduce the item, talk about it, do your interpretation, and then you can have them flip it over and it has an after, and you ask them to do that. And then you just kind of code their responses to see how many of them changed. So if you're bringing out something that they're really not excited about, like a snake or like a piece of taxidermy or like a bug collection, and some of the kids are grossed out by that, but then after your interpretation they find that it's actually really interesting, you can actually chart that using those emotion wheels. Does anyone have any questions at the moment? No. Okay. So that is all I had for